class. In today's session, we are going to work primarily on pivot table. So today's entire 2 hours of training will encircle around pivot table. But before we learn or explore how to use a pivot table in detail, it is important for you to understand as to why would you use a pivot table. Can anyone tell me in the chat box, why do you use pivot table? Why would you use pivot table? Yes, absolutely right, to summarize the data. What else? Why would you use pivot table? How about generating reports? Yes. In order to generate reports, you would use pivot table. What else? To make it short and simple to understand. Absolutely. Concising data, reducing the length of the data. Absolutely right. What else? Who else can tell me? Why would you use pivot table? Pivot table can also be used in order to ask your data questions. So if you want to ask your data questions and you want to know which is the highest revenue or which quarter is the best performance or which product has consistently performed well, those kind of analysis based questions can be asked to your data whose answer can be got through a pivot table. So pivot table is a concise way for data representation. But before we create a pivot table, there are certain prerequisites that your data should meet. There are certain prerequisites that your data should meet. Let us talk about the first thing. There should be no empty rows or columns. It makes it better if there are no empty rows or columns. That is the first criteria. Second, there should be row labels to your data. So your data should have row labels, okay? That is the next criteria. What is the third criteria? The third and the most important criteria or prerequisite which should be met in terms of pivot table is there should be no subtotals within the data. There should be no totals or subtotals within the data. If your data meets these certain criteria or credentials, then your data is good to go and create a pivot table. The next important thing that I would like to tell you is if your data is in table format, then you can still convert it to pivot table. Okay, so if it is like this, can you see this is in table format? How can you tell it is in table format? You can see it has table design here. So you know the data is in table format. So if your data is in table format, yes, you can convert it to pivot table directly from here. Now, many people say we managed to create a pivot table. We somehow manage, but they often say that we end up creating something which may not be exactly looking like what we want to create. I'll repeat what I just said. We end up creating something. Something gets done. Kuch ban jata hai. But it is not exactly what we are looking for. It could be a little different from it. It could have different values from it. Now, the idea is to understand the field list placeholders properly, to understand when to drag an item in row shelf, when to drag an item in the column shelf, when to drag an item in the field list value shelf, and when to drag an item in the filter shelf. Often we use the filter shelf even when there is no requirement of using the filter shelf. So it's very important for us to understand the scope of each part of the pivot table so that when we are creating a pivot table, we don't just create something which is similar to what we want, but we are able to perform accurate analysis and get answers exactly the way we are looking. So with this, we are going to begin with today's session where we are going to cover pivot table in a detailed manner. Firstly, in order to create a pivot table, I repeat, firstly, in order to create a pivot table, your data, one, can be in table format like it is here, and it can also be in a range format. That means it can also be a range of cells. What is a range of cells? A range of cells is a simple collection of cells. So, for example, if you see this data, is this data in table format? No. This is what? This is a range of cells. But I can use this data as well to create a pivot table. Let us come here, and to begin with, we will begin with using this data in order to create our pivot table. We will begin with this data in order to create our pivot table. So the first thing which we are going to do in order to create our pivot table from this data is we will go to insert, and under insert table section, you have pivot table and you also have recommended pivot table. Now let me tell you one thing. If in the next 6 to 8 months, you don't use pivot table in your day-to-day work environment, etc., you don't generate pivot reports, the chances are you will end up forgetting how to create a pivot table. I repeat, if 6 to 8 months after this training, you don't use pivot table, you will end up forgetting how to use pivot table in order to represent your data. In that case, remember, recommended pivot tables will be very, very handy. I repeat, recommended pivot tables will be very, very handy. Can you see what recommended pivot tables does? Recommended pivot tables enables you to create a pivot table from your data. I repeat, it enables you to create a pivot table from your data based on assumptions that the tool makes from your data. So after surveying your data, I repeat, after surveying your data, recommended pivot tables has all these suggestions for you. Average revenue by month and year, sum of quantity by month and product, average revenue by month and product subcategory, sum of revenue by product. These are ready presets. I would like to refer to these as a premix. You know, you get those premixes of different food items. You just have to put hot water and you get your dish. I call these recommended pivot table a premix. You don't have to do much. You select something which is more or less similar to what you want. I repeat, you select one of these pivot tables which are similar to what you want or what you're looking for. Click on OK. And then you make minor modifications. I repeat, you make minor modifications in order to suit your requirement. I repeat, you make minor modifications to suit your requirement. So this is how recommended pivot tables works. What do? You go and select one which is more or less similar to what you're looking for, and you click on OK and you get your recommended pivot table. Click on cancel. But in today's session, we are going through making pivot tables from scratch. So what we are going to do is, we are going to create a pivot table in a step-by-step manner, understanding what is the requirement of the audience and then going ahead with the pivot table option. Firstly, under table design, I'll go to pivot table and I will choose from a table or a range. What does from a table or a range indicate? From a table or a range indicates that you can create a pivot table either from table format, like this case, or from the range of cells like sample superstore. So here it is a table form. Let me tell you all one advantage of having data in table format. If your data, I repeat, if your data is in table format, when new entries are added, you don't have to go and increase the size of your pivot table. No. You just have to go and update. The new entries are automatically considered. I will repeat what I just said. If your data is in table format and from table you convert it into a pivot table, when new entries are added, when new rows of data added to your table, you just have to go and refresh or update your pivot table. You don't have to go back and increase your selected area of your data. Why? Because table automatically accommodates the new entries of data which are made. We will practically explore that option, but right now let us begin with the step-by-step procedure of creating a pivot table. First is select a table or a range. If you see over here, beverage data is the name. This shows that currently my data is in table format. Currently, my data is in table format. Choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. Now, the command is asking me, where would I like my pivot table to be placed? Where would I like my pivot table to be placed? Would I like to place it on a new worksheet? Or would I like to place it on the existing worksheet? If I decide that I would like to place it on the existing worksheet, I need to specify a location that from this cell onwards, P12 onwards, put the pivot table here. Why? Because the existing worksheet already has data on it. I repeat, the existing worksheet already has data on it. And I do not want my pivot table to clash with it. I do not want my pivot table to clash with it. And in order to take care of that, we will always choose new worksheet so that I get a new sheet called sheet 1 where my pivot table will be placed. I repeat, so that I can have a new worksheet where my data can be placed for my pivot table. Click on OK and you will see over here, a new worksheet has been placed. And what is the name of the new worksheet? The name of the new worksheet is called sheet 4. Can you see this sheet 4 over here added? Also, you will see over here the preset or the placeholder for the pivot table. And let me minimize this. Over here in this corner, you will be able to see the pivot table fields. Over here in this corner, you will be able to see the pivot table fields. These labels over here are nothing but the labels of these columns. Can you see these column headers? These are these labels here. Then we have over here the field areas where I can drag and drop my items in order to customize or in order to create my pivot table. However, I can also check these boxes from here and Excel will put it in the appropriate area. But if I want to totally customize it from scratch, I can drag it and I can drop it. I can drag it and I can drop it. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to explain to you what about row shelf, what about column shelf, and what is the value shelf for. Let us talk about row and column. Row and column. This is column. This is row. Row and column are basically for labels. So your text-based values such as your category, subcategory, product name, region, zone, month, location, branch, all of these values which are text in nature will be dragged in the row shelf or the column shelf. So what will be the items? Category, subcategory, region, zone, product name. Okay. What else can you think of? Branch, quarter, month, year. All of these values will either be dragged in the row shelf or in the column shelf. All of these values will be dragged either in the row shelf or in the column shelf. Now let me ask you a question. When you have your phone or your tablet or your iPad or any other device in your hand where you are reading news or you are reading a blog or you are watching videos, when you scroll, what is the direction in which you are scrolling? Tell me, which is the direction? How do you scroll? How do you scroll? On the phone, how do you scroll? Nobody? How do you scroll? What is the direction of scroll?
Upward, I mean.
Yes, up, do, down. Correct, correct. You scroll in this direction.
Yes.
This shows that we are conditioned to read data in that direction. I repeat, this shows that we are conditioned to read data in this direction. And that is why the item which is more, we always put it in the row shelf and not in the column shelf. See this. Does this look better or does this look better? Does this look better? Or does this look better? So since we are conditioned to read data in this manner, up to down, okay, it is always better to have a longer pivot table rather than a wider pivot table. So always focus on length of the pivot table and not width of the pivot table. So always focus on a long pivot table and not on a wider pivot table. Now, considering this, I'm going to take the product here and I'm going to take anything, either the revenue or the quantity in the value shelf. Now, the value shelf basically has mathematical calculations. So, sum, minimum, maximum, count, average. These are the values which are taking place in the value shelf. Now, since these values are mathematical in nature, I will put number values always in the value shelf. So what do you mean by number values? Sales, profit, quantity, estimate, actual, achieved, target versus achieved. So all of these values will come in the value shelf. So right now I'm going to take the quantity in the value shelf. And by default, what I get is the sum of the quantity by product. Now, suppose I decide that I want the product main category as well. See what happens. If I check this, it will come below the product. Can you see this? Is this looking proper? No, because the main category should be on top and the product should be under it. So these can be reordered. Okay. Can you see move up over here? I can move it up. Can you see move down over here? I can move it down. Or I can manually move it up or down. So once you create a part of the pivot table, you can always tweak it and make minor modifications in order to suit your requirement. So you have the product main categories, and below that you have the products. Along with this, if with the sum of quantity, you also want the average revenue. Take the revenue, drag and drop it here. Can you see sum of revenue and sum of quantity? These are default settings. When you come to sum of revenue and do a double mouse click, you get this value field settings which opens in front of you. From here, you can say summarize value by, I repeat, you can say summarize value by, and you can choose average here and click on it. Is it clear, everyone? Any questions? Please try this much with the beverage data, everyone. Please try this, everyone, with the beverage data before we go ahead. Let me know when you're complete. Yes, perfect. Done. Okay, everyone else completed? Let us go ahead now and let us explore some other functionality of the pivot table. Firstly, I'm going to clear the pivot table. Now, there are two methods of clearing it. One is you drag and drop the items like this from the pivot table. The other option is you can uncheck from here. Either option is not incorrect. So, both these ways they clear your pivot table. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the month, and along with the month I'm going to take the revenue. If I want the product wise details, I will take the product main category in the column shelf. So I get the data for beverages and snacks. Now here what I am seeing is the grand total, right? Because it is the sum of the total. If I want the percentage of total, which is giving me this figure, I can double click here, okay? Or I can come here and say value field settings. When I click on value field settings, this particular option opens up in front of me. Now earlier I was doing summarize value by and I chose average from here. In this scenario now, when I want percentage based values, I can click on this option here, which says show value as. Show value as enables me to represent the calculation as the percentage of grand total. Show value as enables me to represent the percentage as a grand total. Click on OK. And now you can see the values as percentage wise values. For further detailing, if you want, you can also take the year and check it. Now, by default, the year will go into the value shelf. So, remove the year, and what I will do is drag and drop the year above the month. So, you will have the year, and below that, you will have the month. I repeat, you will have the year. Below that, you have the month. Also, by doing this, this becomes collapsible. Can you see this? You can collapse these entries, or as we call it, group them, okay, manually. Or you can go to pivot table analyze and click on collapse or expand field. So under pivot table analyze, under active field, we have collapsing and we have expanding of the labels. If you want to do it to all of them, that means if you want to expand or collapse all the items, you can click over here to collapse and this plus sign to expand. But if you only want to target any one item, then you can manually go and do it from here. So in order to target all items, you do it from the active field. But if you want to target any one item or two items, you can manually. So when individual items need to be affected, you do it manually. If you want to affect global items, that means all items, then you can do it from the active field plus and minus option, which denotes collapsing and expanding. So let me repeat what I've done over here. In the row shelf, I have the year. Under that, I have the month. In the column shelf, I have main category of the products, that is the beverages and snacks. And in value shelf, I have the revenue, but I have the percentage of total revenue. Please try, everyone.
Can you show again how you did into percentage?
Yes, yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I
Yes.
forgot. Yeah.
So, no problem. So, I'm removing the revenue for now. I'm going to take the revenue back in the value shell. After dragging and dropping the revenue in the value shell, click on the drop down here and click on value field settings. Once you click on value field settings, under summarize value by, there is show value as. Next to summarize value by, there is show value as. And under this, say percentage of grand total and click on OK. Anyone else wants anything to be repeated? Are you all trying it out, everyone? What about the other participants? Have you all completed? How is it going for you all? Okay, good work, everyone. Let us drag and drop the items and clear the pivot table. Now, in the next thing which I'm going to show you is, I'm going to show you the collapsible nature with the product main category and the product. So what will I do? I will take the main category. Below that, I will take the product and I will take the quantity in the value field shell. Now, in the row label, next to beverage, you have the minus sign, which is collapsible. Next to snacks as well, you have the collapsible sign. Now, if you want to convert it to percentage-wise values, or you want to convert it to, for example, a count or a head count, double-click on sum of quantity, click on count, and click on OK. This will give you the count or the head count of your products. Let us go one step further and let us try to filter the data. In order to filter the data, go to row labels and in the drop down, you will see select field. In the drop down, you will see select field. There is product main category and below that, you will see product. I repeat, you will see product main category and below that, you will see product. Click on product main category. Then when you click on product main category, you can filter based on that. However, when you click on product category, you can filter based on that. So depending upon the field that is selected in the filter shelf, you can either filter based on the main category or you can filter based on the product name. You can click like these and check and uncheck the boxes next to it and filter the data. How do you know that the data has been filtered? When you filter the data, you will see this filter icon which appears in front of you. When you filter the data, you will see this filter icon which appears over here. If you want to clear the filter, click on this, okay? Go to the product category and you will get the option to clear the filter from the product. You will get the option to clear the filter from the product. As soon as you clear the filter from the product, you will see the whole data or the entire data. So in this manner, you can apply a filter to the items which are there in the row shelf. If you have items in the column shelf, You can click on column labels and you can filter from here as well. Now let me ask you a question. If I want to filter based on months, is months there in the row or the column shelf? Is months there in the row or the column shelf? No. Months is neither in the row shelf nor is it there in the column shelf. And that is why if you want to filter data based on items that are neither in the row shelf nor in the column shelf, I repeat, if you want to filter based on items which are neither in the row shelf nor in the column shelf, then we use the filter shelf in order to filter the data. The filter shelf will enable you to filter the data for items which are not in row shelf or in column shelf. That is why when you want to go ahead with filtering data for items which are neither represented in row nor represented in column, then we use the filter shelf. So right now, if I want to filter based on month, I'll drag and drop month in the filter shelf. And then I can filter from here. To multi-select items, click here, select the option multi-select, and then use the checkbox and select the items. In order to clear the filter, first come here, click on all, say OK, and then drag the item out of the filter. If I want to filter based on product category or on years, I can do it from here or from the years from the column shelf. I don't need to use filter shelf in order to filter based on an item which is either there in row shelf or in column shelf. Please try this, everyone. How is it going, everyone? Are you all managing? Are you all able to understand the scope of the tool? Have you all completed, everyone?
Why your number short and my numbers are big? If I can say,
Because mine is filtered. 1 minute. I'll remove the filter. I'm only seeing 2015's data. See? Do our numbers tally now?
no, mines are in 1096, 24.
Because I am seeing count. You must be seeing some. 1 minute.
Values. So,
Now, proper? Yes?
yeah, some of, but still
I was
not
seeing,
big.
1 minute. I was seeing count. Or you must be seeing revenue. Are you seeing revenue? You want to share your
No,
screen?
no, it's same like yours, a product, year and quantity.
Can I have a look? Can you share screen? 1 minute. Wait.
Sure. Just a second.
1 minute. Yeah. Share your screen. Okay, so what you have done is you are taking the sum of the year. Remove the year from the value shell. Or just uncheck the year. Yes. Uncheck the year. That's fine now.
Same.
Yeah, it's correct now.
Ah. Okay. Ah,
It's,
yeah.
it's proper.
Okay.
In your case, what had happened, the year had also gone here. The year is supposed to be in column shell. So take the year and put it in column shell. Okay, let us go ahead. I'm going to clear up the pivot table and remove the items from the pivot table. Now, as I showed you earlier, where we had the collapsible entities under product and product name category, under year and month. In the same manner, you can group your data. I repeat, you can group your data based on your requirement. So, for example, if I take the products in the row shelf and I take the revenue in the value shelf, I can take the juices and I can group them. Okay. Or I can take the liquid items and I can group them. So, for example, if I want, what I can do is I can take 3 items from here. Okay. I can take 3 items from here and I can come to pivot table analyze and I can do a group selection. What will group selection do? Group selection, as the name suggests, will group these 3 items into group 1. I repeat, I took 3 items and I went into pivot table analyze and I chose group selection. Group selection will group these 3 items together. Click here, rename this and let us call this as junk food. For example, enter. So this is one group which I have which has been called as junk food. Okay. Now, select the next 3 items. Okay. When you're selecting the next 3 items, make sure you take the label and the item. Make sure you take the label and the item. Make sure you take the label and the item. Again, go to pivot table, analyze, group selection, and now you come in group 2 and you call this healthy food. Okay. Then you take the last group, again go to group selection and call this mid meals. Okay. So what have I done? I have created my own grouping. And if you see the row shelf, you will see product name and you will see product 2, which is this subdivision, which I have created of healthy, mid meals and junk food. Can you see this? Let me show you one more time. Basically, what I did was I selected 3 items or 4 items from here. Okay. And I went to pivot table, analyze. And under the group option, I went and clicked on group selection. Now, as the name suggests group selection, what is it going to do? It will group these items together. And let me rename this as junk. Now, this one group is created, but the other data gets divided into individual groups. I repeat, it gets divided into individual groups. In order to avoid that, or in order to take care of that, what I am going to do is, I am going to rename these groups by selecting them together as groups as per my requirement. So this is called as the first type of grouping based on manual groups. This is the first type of grouping. There are 3 types of grouping, okay? First type is this manual. Second, based on numbers. And the third on dates. So we are going to do it step by step. This is the manual one which I have showed you, where you select a group or a chunk and group them together. Please try this, everyone. Please try this, everyone, and let me know when you are complete so that I can show you how to remove the groups. Did you all complete this grouping, everyone? Manually, you have to do it, okay? Select it and group it. Select it and group it. And you can rename the group like this. What will you rename this to? Healthy items. And group 3. In order to ungroup it, what will you do? As the name suggests, select it and click on ungroup. So select it and click on ungroup. It will ungroup the items. Okay, when you select it, you just click on ungroup. It will remove the grouping. Okay, now let us go to the next type of grouping, which is called as grouping based on number value. I repeat, which is called as grouping based on number value. Now, in grouping based on number value, we will need anything that is unique for my items. We will need anything that is unique for my items. So I will come here and add a serial number column. And I will write 1. And I will come to the corner and drag it down. At the end of the data set, I will say fill series. At the end of the data set, I will say fill series. Automatically, the number values will be filled and it will complete the column for me. I am adding the serial number column so that it will help me for grouping based on number values. Then I will go to my pivot table and I will only do a refresh data. Automatically, the serial number column will get added here. What did I do? I went to my main data source. I added one new column called serial number. And in that, I put number values starting at 1 and I dragged till the end. And I went to the bottom and said fill series in order to complete filling that entire series with numbers in numeric order. Then what I did was, I am going to go now. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go to my pivot table sheet, which is sheet 4. And on sheet 4, I do a simple refresh. By doing a refresh, what am I doing? I am telling pivot table, go to the table and fetch all the data. The new data which has been added, and if any data has been updated, fetch either of that. Is that clear? Then what I'm going to do now over here, in the row shelf, I repeat, in the row shelf, I will drag and drop any numeric value because grouping happens in the row shelf. Earlier, when I did the manual grouping, I did it in the row shelf. Even when I do number-based grouping or date-based grouping, it is always done in the row shelf. So I'm going to take the revenue and drag and drop it in the row shelf. And in the value shelf, I repeat, in the value shelf, I will take anything equal to the count of 1 for one employee. In the value shelf, I will take anything equal to the count of 1 for one employee. So I'm going to take the serial number and I'm going to drag it in the value shelf. So in the row shelf, I have my revenue. In the value shelf, I have my sum of serial number. The next step which I am going to do is the important step where I convert the sum to a count in order to know how many people have got the same revenue. I repeat, right now it is showing me sum of my revenue. Serial number, I'm going to convert it to a count. So I know, see, 2 people have got 109, 4 people have got 120. Scroll down. 5 people have got 520. So what will the count of serial number give me? It will count how many people have got similar value in terms of revenue. Then go to the first cell here in the row label and click on either group selection or group field. Group field has newly been added, which enables you to group dates as well as number values. But even if you click on group selection, the same pop-up will open. Click on group field, same thing will open. So whether you click on group selection or you click on group field, same grouping pop-up is going to open up in front of you. The starting and the ending point is given to you by Excel after surveying your data. If you want to change the starting point, you can change the starting point. If you want to change the ending point, you can change the ending. So here, the starting point 100 is a whole number. So I can let it be 100. The ending point is an uneven number. So I will make it 700, which is again a whole number. The difference is of 100. So my groups will be revenue between 100 to 200, between 200 to 300, between 300 to 400, and how many people or how many products fall in that bracket. So here you can see maximum revenue of products is between this bracket. Maximum revenue of products is in this bracket. How do you clear this? First go to pivot table, click on the grouping and say ungroup. And then drag and drop the items outside. Let me show this to you one more time. The first thing that we do is go to the beverage data and add this new column called serial number. First thing, go to the beverage data, add a new column called serial number. Then go to your sheet of your pivot table and you will refresh the sheet to fetch the data in this particular sheet. Then let us go and talk about grouping. Grouping takes place in the row shelf. That is why we will take the item we want to group on the basis of what? In the row shelf. So the revenue will be dragged in the row shelf. If you want to group based on quantity, you will take quantity in the row shelf. But I want to group based on revenue, so I will take revenue in the row shelf. In the value shelf, I will take anything equal to the count of 1 for one product, and hence I will take my serial number. By default, when I drag and drop it, you will see sum of serial number. I repeat, by default, when I drag and drop it, you will see sum of serial number. You can double click on the sum of serial number and you can convert the sum of serial number. I repeat, you can convert the sum of serial number into an count. Click on count, say OK. And now we will come to the grouping part. Select the first item just below the row label and under pivot table analyze, you will see in the group category, there is group selection and there is something called group field. Either you can go with group selection or you can go with group. Either you can go with group selection or you can go with group field. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to click on group selection. Click on it. And here, you can say starting at 100, ending at converted to 700, group by 100. If you want to group by 50, you can group by 50 also. If you want to group by 200, you can group by 200. That is totally customizable as per your requirement. Click on OK and these are the groups. Now the largest item is in this bracket of 500 to 700 revenue. Please try this everyone and let me know if you have any questions or queries. Please try, everyone. Anyone has any questions or queries, please let me know. Has everyone completed this? If you all have completed this, remove the items from the, ungroup the items first and then remove the items from the revenue column. We are now going to talk about how to use the slicer. In order to use the slicer, I'm going to take the product main category. I'm going to take the product name and I'm going to take the revenue versus quantity, both of them. Revenue is also there, quantity is also. Now, when I click on pivot table analyze, I can apply a slicer to any one item of my column labels. I repeat, I can apply a slicer to any item of my pivot table fields. Click on insert slicer, click on month and say OK. Right now, I have applied a slicer on month. Now, the slicer of a pivot table is very, very similar to the slicer in case of a table. So, just like you have a slicer of a table, you also have a slicer of a pivot table. Now, what is a slicer? Can anyone tell me quickly in chat box what is slicer? What is a slicer? Anyone, what is a slicer? What does a slicer do or what is a slicer? A slicer is a visual filter which enables me to filter my data visually with the help of buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the corner, increase the size of the slicer. Then I will go in slicer and under buttons and in the column section, increase the columns. Then I will change the height of the slicer buttons. And this is my slicer. Now, when I click on January, I will see January related data. When I click on February, I will see February related data. When I click on April, I will see April related data. Suppose I want to see January, February and March, all 3 months, hold down Shift key. Click on January, hold down Shift key and click on March. All the 3 items will get selected. Clear the slicer. Suppose you want January, May, September and October. Click on January, hold Control key down. Click on May, click on September and click on October. All 4 items have got selected. Clear the slicer from here. In this way, you can visually filter your pivot table based on your requirements. If you want to clear a slicer. You end up applying a slicer, but you delete the slicer. Now, if you come over here, you are seeing filtered data, correct? How will you clear this? You will have to go and come to month here. Can you see month in the field list? And click on select all from here and say OK. And this way you will be clearing the filter from your pivot table. So if you happen to delete a slicer without clearing it and you are seeing filtered data, you can always clear it from the field list. Please try slicer, everyone. Please try slicer. Click on insert slicer, choose year and say OK. And this is my year slice. When I click on 2015, I will see data of 2015. When I click on 16, I will see data of 16. And from here, I can clear the slice. Okay, very good, everyone. Now let us go to beverage. From beverage data, I am now going to go to the sample superstore. Everyone has sample superstore data. We have used it in the past for data cleaning and for splitting, right? So now what we are going to do is, this data is a very extensive data. We can even practice timeline filter on this, which is used to filter time series data. So we will use this data in order to create a timeline filter. I repeat, we will use this data in order to create a timeline filter. Okay. So for that, what we are going to do is, we are going to select the data, and after selecting the data, we will go to insert. When I click on insert, I will go to pivot table. Now here pivot table asks me table or a range. But here, since this sample superstore, I repeat, since sample superstore is not in table format, but it is in a range of cells or it is in range format, you will see the selection of the range. If it was in table format, here in this white box, you would get the name of the table. But since you get sheet name and reference of cells, it shows that it is not a table, it is a range of cells. Now they will ask me, choose where you want your pivot table to be placed. Click on new worksheet. I'm starting from the beginning. So for those who joined late, this is what you have missed. So you can go through it with me. Click on OK. Now, this is the pivot table placeholder, and these are the pivot table fields. Sometimes what happens is, by mistake, you end up closing this. And even when you select your pivot table, you still don't get the field list. Go to pivot table analyze, and under show, click on field list. What will it do? it will enable you to see the pivot table field list. Now there are 4 placeholders here where you can drag your items. What are these items? These items are the labels of the columns of your data. So you have row ID, order ID, ship date, customer ID, product name, product subcategory, product ID. These are the labels, and these are the same labels that you can scroll and see. When you want to create a pivot table, you will drag an item from here and put it in the row shelf, and you will drag a value, like a number value, in the value shelf, and your pivot table will be created. So for example, I can come here and I can take the ship mode, and I can come to quantity and take the quantity. Now what is this? This is ship mode and the sum of quantity. If I want the region along with this, I can take the region and I can place it above the ship mode. So now you can see the region, and below that you can see the ship mode. If you do not want sum of quantity, and instead of sum of quantity, you would like to see percentage of quantity, double click on it. Next to summarize value, click on show value as. On the drop down, choose percentage of grand total. Click on OK, and here you will see percentage wise values of your grand total. I repeat, you will see percentage wise values of your grand total. Click on pivot table analyze, and in pivot table analyze, now you can go and insert the slicer. Under pivot table analyze, you can now go and insert your slicer. Click on insert slicer. I'm going to insert 2 slicers, one on category and one on subcategory. The reason I'm inserting 2 slicers is because I want to show you that these slicers are context sensitive. Now, what do I mean by context sensitive? If I make a change to the main slicer, it will affect the items of my second slicer. So if I choose a particular category in the category slicer, only the items relevant to that category will show up in subcategory. So click on OK, and here you have the 2 slices. Reduce the slicer in size, move the slicer next to it, increase the slicer in size, reduce it in height a little bit, and add more columns. Can you see the 2 slicers now very clearly? Now see what happens. When I come to this slicer and I click on furniture, you will see furniture related data here. But in subcategory, only items which come under furniture are available to select. Rest are all gray. This shows that slicer, when you apply more than one slicer, it is context sensitive. That means one slicer becomes the main slicer, the other one becomes the subdivision or the secondary slice. Similarly, when I click on office supplies, you will see office supplies related data. When I click on technology, you will see technology related data. When I clear the slicer, you will see all the data. So in this manner, if I choose furniture, hold down control, take office supplies, you will only see in subcategory data relevant to furniture and office supplies. Please try this, everyone. When you are done, clear out the slicer and delete the slice. Click on the pivot table. Have you all completed this, everyone? Have you all completed this? Okay, super. Now we are going to apply a timeline filter. Now timeline filter is a visual filter just like the slicer. And if you see, it is in the same section called filter. Now timeline filter, as the name suggests, is used to filter out time series data. I repeat, timeline filter is used to filter out time series data. If you have data which is based on time series, you can use the timeline filter in order to filter. Click on timeline filter, and now you will only see two items here, order date and ship date. Why? Because both of them are date series. Let's go back to sample superstore and see order date and ship date. Both are date. Data type is date here. So let us go to pivot table, analyze, click on insert timeline, and either we will apply a filter on ship date or we will apply one on order date, whichever one we want. Click on OK, and here you have your timeline filter. Firstly, what you can do is you can change the color of your timeline filter. Secondly, you can choose the window within which you want to see the data. Suppose I want to see the data of July 2018. Now, these are the orders of July 2018. Can you see clear filter is active now? Why is clear filter active? Because I have applied the filter. Come and increase the window. Now I'm seeing the data for July and for August. Clear the filter. Apply for October to December. Now you are seeing the data for October to December. The only drawback in the timeline filter is, just like in a normal slicer, you can select non-continuous items. In timeline filter, you have to select continuous items only. You can't take little data from 18, little from 19, and avoid 2020 and directly go and select from 2021. You have to take it in one line. So here it is taken third quarter of 2018 and the fourth quarter. So it's taking all the data from July to December. Now this over here is nothing but your selection label. I am closing the selection label and you will not see the window which it is referring to. When I close the selection label, you will not see the window it is referring to. Put the selection label on. Now you will see the window it is referring to. This scroll bar helps you to see the data. Now, if you see in the scroll bar, as you scroll, you will see a little color which shows which window is selected. If you don't select anything, you will see the whole bar. Okay, all the data. But if you go and select August, you will see a small coloring here. This shows that the selected area is in. If you don't have the scroll bar, I repeat, if you uncheck the scroll bar and don't have the scroll bar, you can use these arrow keys to navigate. You'll use these arrow keys to navigate. Put the scroll bar on. Time level, this is your time level. It shows you the manner in which you are seeing the data. Are you seeing it year-wise? Are you seeing it quarter-wise? Are you seeing it month-wise? I like to see it month-wise because month, above that you always see the years. So it's easier to select. And then finally you have a header which shows you which is the column label based on what the timeline filter has been applied. And the header here is order date. And the header here is order date. Add the order date, remove the order. If you do not want your slicer, you can simply clear the slicer and you can delete. So this is your timeline filter or your slicer. Now, one mistake which one of the participants did in one of the training program, they applied two slicers, order date and ship date. Now, as you know, the slicer is context sensitive. That means the window you see, it will only show you that data. They applied order date for 2018 slicer, and in ship date, they tried to apply a different year. What will happen? You will not see any data because you are trying to see ordered in 2018 but shipped in 2020. So it will not take 2 years to ship. So they did not see any data. So just make sure when you apply more than one slicer, you are looking at a particular window of data only. Yeah. Please try this, everyone. Timeline filter. Good work, everyone. Thank you for letting me know you all have completed. I have deleted the slicer now. Now, since we are using this data, okay, I will show you how to group based on date data type, because here there are a lot of dates and they are properly formatted as well. So in order to group date wise, the methodology remains the same. In the row shelf, we will take the date. Earlier, when we were grouping based on number, in the row shelf, we took a number value. Here, we will take a date value. And in the value shelf, I will take any item equal to the count of 1 for one employee. So I can take the row ID, I can take the the order ID, I can take the product ID. Any ID like this can be taken because it will be unique for all the different products. So take the order ID in the value field shelf. So here in the rows, I have the order date. In the values, I have the count of the order ID. And I will take the first item just below the row label and click on group field. I can also click on group selection. I will get the same pop-up. Starting date, it has picked up. Ending date also, it has picked up from the data. Now, if I want to group month-wise, I can group month and year-wise. So it will give me the year, and within the year, in which month, it will give me the grouping. Click on OK. And here I have completed in 2015, 1,993 orders were there, and month-wise orders are given. And similarly, the data is given for everything. If I want the groups to collapse, all I have to do is click on this minus sign, and I get the subtotals of the year 2015, of the year 2016, and the year 17 and 18. Can you all please try this, everyone? Grouping based on date. Please try, everyone. Sure, definitely. First, I'll just ungroup this whole thing. I'll remove the items. Now, in order to group based on date, we need to take any date value in the row shelf. Because as you know, grouping takes place in the row shelf. So we can either take the order date or the ship date in the row shelf. So I'm going to take the order date, drag and drop it in the row shelf. Now, in the value shelf, I will drag and drop any item that is equal to 1 for one product or for one order. Okay, I can either take the order ID or I can take the row ID. I repeat, I can either go ahead and take the order ID or I can take the row ID. Click and drag and take the order ID in the value shelf. And right now I have the count of the order ID. If I don't want count, I can double click and convert it into sum. But I need the count in order to know how many people have ordered on the same date. So basically here on this particular date, 11 people have ordered. On this particular date, 17 people have ordered. Now what I'm going to do is, in order to group, I will go to the row, the column of the row, just below the row label. I will select the first item, click on pivot table analyze and click on group selection. Group selection will enable me to group based on order date. Group selection will enable me to group based on order date. I can group month-wise and year-wise. Click on OK. And here I have my date. If I want to collapse it, I can collapse everything from here. If I want to expand everything, I will expand from here. But if I want to affect individual items like only the year 2015, I will do it from here. Please try this, everyone. Please try this, everyone, and then we'll go ahead with the design options. Please try this, everyone, then we will go ahead with the design options. Okay, great. Everyone has completed. Now, next to pivot table analyze, you have something which is called as design. Next to pivot table analyze, we have something which is called as design. When you click on design, you get layout, pivot style options, and pivot table styles. If you want to apply a quick tabular type look and feel to your pivot table, you can choose from here. If you want banded rows, you can choose banded rows. See the difference of banded rows? If you want banded columns, you can choose banded columns. You can choose any style, whichever you like. If you don't want banded rows and columns, you can remove it. Now, if you don't want row headers, you can remove your row headers. That way, the headings of your rows, like your 2015 and 16, they will not be colored. If you want to remove column headers and don't want them to be bold, you can remove column headers from here. So you have row headers and you have column headers. Can you all try this much, everyone? Pivot table design, try pivot table style options and pivot table styles. Okay, let us go ahead. Now, if you see over here, next to 2015, you have something which is called as the subtotal of the months. Next to 2016, you have the subtotal of the months. Next to 2017, you have the subtotal of the months, right? Now, in order to have this below the data, because generally, how are we used to seeing numbers? You have the numbers, you have the total down, correct? Or you have the numbers, you have the average down. So we can go into subtotals and say, show subtotals at the bottom of the group. Subtotals at the bottom of the group will enable you to see the subtotals below the group. Can you see this? Right. Can you see this? The subtotal of this is given here. This is the data, the subtotal is given down. Okay, so you have subtotals at the bottom of the group. If you want to change this back again to the top of the group, it will put it at the top of the group. Now, by default, pivot table is a concise tool. It's a space saving tool. The idea of using a pivot table is to show concise value, to show condensed values. And in order to take care of this, they give the subtotal at the top of the group because there is empty space there and they don't waste another row of data. But if you would like to show the subtotal at the bottom of the group and you feel it is better for you to read, you can always put the subtotal at the bottom of the group. Then you have something which is called as grand total. The grand total is at the end of the data. Let me take the shift mode here. So here you have the grand total at the end of the data and you have the grand total here as well. If you don't want the grand total, you can come into pivot table design and say off for rows and columns. This will close the grand total column for the rows as well as for the columns. Let me put on the row grand total and column grand total to show you on for rows and columns. So here what you are seeing is the year wise data, and what you are seeing here is the month wise data. Sorry, this is not year wise. This is first class, same day, second class is vertically in this grand total. This is your class wise, correct? In this row, you have your class wise data for your grand total, whereas in this column, you are seeing it for month wise. This is your month wise. So these are your two grand totals. If you come to design and you click on off for rows and columns, it will turn off the grand total. So you will not see the grand. Now, next to subtotals and grand totals, you have report layout. Report layout means it adds another column for you for the items which are there in row labels. I repeat, if you see, there are two items in row labels. You have the years and you have the months. You have the years and you have the months. If you come into report layout, you can add an additional column. So show in outline view and it will add an additional column. This is outline view or tabular view. Both are similar. So here now you have 2015, 16 and 17 in a separate column and you have your months in a separate column. If you want to make it one, you can go into report layout and say compact view. By default, pivot table is always shown in compact view. So subtotals at the top of the groups, items in the rows column in one column, nested. But if you would like to go for outline view or for tabular view, you can show it like this. If you want items to be repeated, like for example, it is understood. Under 2015, you have these months. Under 2016, you have these months. You can go into report layout and you can say repeat all item labels. This will repeat the item labels in the column. This will repeat the item labels in the column. You can go back here and you can say do not repeat item labels and it will not repeat the item labels. If you feel your data is very condensed and there is no breathing space in your data, I repeat, if you feel your data is very condensed and there is no breathing space in your data, you can always go to blank rows and insert a blank line after each item. You can go into blank rows and you can insert a blank line after each item. Can you see this blank line? So after each item, you'll see one blank line. Now, if you don't want to see the blank line, you can go back to blank rows and say remove blank line. You don't have to manually delete. You just go and remove from there. Is it clear? Also, in pivot table, as you know, it's a concise tool. If you come to any item and you double click on that item, it gives you a new page which shows you what are the details that item is made up of. It gives you a detailed report of what all the item is made up. Can you try out these design related options, please? Please explore these design related items. everyone complete this? Yes? Okay, now I'm going to show you the most interesting option in case of pivot table. Now, as I told you, whenever you want to filter based on an item which is neither there in row shelf or in column shelf, we drag it to the filter shelf. Suppose I take my segment in the filter shelf. Can you see over here? There are three types of segments: corporate, consumer, and home office. If I go to pivot table analyze, and under the name of the pivot table, under options, if I click on show report filter pages, when I click on show report filter pages, it gives me individual page reports, three. One for corporate, one for consumer, one for home office. Click on it. Click on segment, say okay. And here you have one page for consumer related pivot. You have one pivot report for corporate related data. And you have one for home office. What did I do? I went to my pivot table. In the filter shelf, I dragged and dropped an item. And then under pivot table analyze, I went into options, and under options, I chose show report filter pages. Show report filter pages, as the name suggests, enables me to generate individual page reports of my data. It enables me to generate individual page reports of my data. Did you all try the individual page reports? These are called generating report filter pages. What are these? These are pivot reports, but filtered versions of them. And the best part about these is the names of the pages are synonymous with the data. So on the consumer page, you'll see consumer as the page name. On the corporate page, you'll see corporate as the page name. On the home office page, you'll see home office as the page name. You can try it for region, you can try it for state, you can try it for category of products. Generally, try it for an item which has 4, 5. If you try it for an item which has 20, then it will take very long to load. You know, it will not give you, but it will take longer. So anything which has 3 or 5 items, you can try out report filter pages. Okay. Now, if you all have any questions, any queries, we have completed today's training of pivot table. So I do hope it has helped you in getting clarity on the subject of pivot table. And I do hope you all can start using the pivot table on your regular work data and generate better charts and reports. Charts will be a separate topic which we will be covering. And then I will again show you pivot charts in order to complete the entire training circle. So yes, we are doing it in a step-by-step manner. Let me know if you all have any questions or any queries. For those who've joined in late, the session has been recorded. I will be sharing the recording with you all